Explain this lawsuit that you have.
In 2004, after military investigative reports revealed the role of private military contractors in the atrocities in Abu Ghraib, we actually, with other lawyers, brought 3 lawsuits against 2 sets of private military contractors. One on behalf of 256 victims, which was dismissed by the Court of Appeals in Washington. A second one against a company called L3 Services that provided translation services to the U.S. military, and that was brought in Maryland, and that settled on behalf of 71. And this last lawsuit on behalf of Salah and 3 other victims of torture at the Abu Ghraib hard site against a private military contractor called CACI International, CACI, which provided interrogation services for the U.S. government. And the allegations there, which are based on our own investigation and conclusions of military investigators, is that CACI employees played an essential role in the torture and abuse in Abu Ghraib by ordering low-level military employees to soften up detainees for eventual interrogation by CACI employees. So this lawsuit seeks to hold CACI, the corporate entity, responsible for the actions of its employees.
I wanted to turn to the Kiobel case. In 2012, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments on whether corporations can be sued in U.S. courts for human rights abuses committed overseas. That case is called Kiobel versus Royal Dutch Petroleum. We spoke to Marco Simons, legal director of Earthrights International, who explained the case's significance.
Yeah, so this case is really about whether a corporation that participates in serious human rights abuses, such as crimes against humanity or genocide or state-sponsored torture, can profit from those abuses and shield those profits from the victims when the victims come to take them to court. It's essentially about whether corporations are immune from any kind of liability for serious human rights abuses worldwide. And that's what the Court of Appeals held in this case. They said under no circumstances can a corporation ever be sued for the most serious human rights violations today.
That's Marco Simons talking about Kiobel versus Royal Dutch Petroleum. Simons is legal director of Earthrights. Can you talk about the significance of this case?
Yeah, so Kiobel appeared to present the possibility that corporations would be immune for liability under this alien tort statute. But the court pivoted a little bit and instead limited the alien tort statute in a different way by suggesting that when all of the aspects of the legal claim occur abroad, extraterritorially, courts should not hear those cases. In Kiobel, you had Nigerian plaintiffs, British and Dutch corporations, who alleged that there were crimes against humanity and torture committed in Nigeria, so there were no connections to the United States. And in our case, the district court nevertheless dismissed our case on a kind of narrow, a formalistic reading of the Kiobel decision. But our position in the Court of Appeals, which recently heard our appeal, is that the Supreme Court recognized that when there are connections to the United States, such as here where you have a U.S. corporation who entered into contract with the U.S. government and conspired with U.S. military personnel in a U.S.-run prison, the connections to the United States are so strong that U.S. courts have to provide a remedy to foreign nationals for international law violations.
Former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld claimed he first learned of the extent of the Abu Ghraib abuse after the photographs were made public. This is what he told Congress after the scandal broke in May of 2004.
It breaks our hearts that, in fact, someone didn't say, wait, look, this is terrible. We need to do something to manage the legal part of it was proceeding along fine. What wasn't proceeding along fine is the fact that the president didn't know, and you didn't know, and I didn't know, and the as a result, somebody just sent a secret report to the press, and there they are.
That's former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, who has been held accountable for what happened at Abu Ghraib.
Very few people, just a number of low-level military employees like Charles Grainer and Ivan Frederick and some others who were court-martialed for their role in Abu Ghraib, but no high-level officials. And this suit seeks to hold responsible the corporate entities that conspired with those who were court-martialed and in some cases ordered them to undertake the abuse. And that's a very important feature of this story, the legacy of Abu Ghraib. Now, how does Salah's treatment compare to the other prisoners that you're representing in this suit? It's representative. All of them endured forced nudity. A number of the others endured also electric shocks and sleep deprivation and all forms of sexual humiliation, attacks by guards, physical abuse, a whole constellation of a serious mistreatment. I want to ask you more about the role of CACI International, as they call themselves. Others refer to them as CACI, in Abu Ghraib. First, though, I wanted to go to a clip of the group's, of the company's promotional video.
Character. It's that unique set of moral and ethical qualities that defines who we are. CACI is built on a foundation of character. For 50 years, our defense, homeland security, intelligence, and federal civilian customers have depended on CACI for world-leading information solutions. They count on us for our character, honesty, integrity, commitment, respect. Character. It defines who we are.
That's an ad from CACI or CACI, Bahar Asmi of CCR.
Well, I don't have any specific information upon which, they base their claims to sort of ethical behavior. I think a feature of character and sort of ethical behavior would be taking responsibility for the conduct of its employees in Abu Ghraib.
And what exactly did they do?
Well, so one other data point we have about CACI is after they successfully dismissed the lawsuit in the trial court, they sought to impose costs against our 4 torture victims. So, given the massive economic disparity, a multi-billion-dollar corporation on the one hand, and 4 torture victims, 3 of whom are clearly indigent, that suggests the purpose was simply to deter and intimidate our plaintiffs and other human rights victims from seeking accountability in U.S. courts.
I wanted to go to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh. In 2004, he broke the story about the abuse and torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib. Then in 2010, he revealed U.S. forces are carrying out battlefield executions of prisoners in Afghanistan. This is Hersh speaking during a discussion at the Global Investigative Journalism Conference in Geneva.
And the purpose of my stories was to take it out of the field into the White House, and where it does, it's not that the president or the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Rumsfeld, or Bush or Cheney, it's not that they knew what happened in Abu Ghraib, it's that they had allowed this kind of activity to happen. And I'll tell you right now, one of the great tragedies of my country is that Mr. Obama is looking the other way, because equally horrible things are happening to prisoners, to those we capture in Afghanistan. They're being executed in the battlefield. It's unbelievable stuff going on there that doesn't necessarily get reported. And things don't change.
That was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who exposed the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, Seymour Hersh, and then went on to expose in the New Yorker magazine these photographs of Abu Ghraib. And last week was the 10-week anniversary of that expose.
Mm-hmm. Well, he brings up a very important point even about the current administration, which is the lack of accountability across the board for serious human rights violations by current administration officials and former administration officials in Abu Ghraib, in Guantanamo, in Bagram, Kandahar, in secret detention sites. The failure for the Obama administration to seek any kind of meaningful accountability, criminal or civil, is, I think, a deep stain on Obama's legacy and a critical mistake, as it permits the possibility of repeat conduct and impunity.
So what makes you think your case can move forward since it was dismissed by a lower court?
Well, we've recently a court of appeals has heard our appeal in Richmond, Virginia, and I think the fact that there are such strong U.S. connections to the torture here, and because the core purpose of the human rights statute we're relying on, the Alien Tort Statute, is to provide a remedy when U.S. subjects commit international law violations. We're hopeful that the Court of Appeals will reinstate the case.
And the issue of the prisoners having to pay the defense costs? That's
also on appeal, and we're hopeful that that will get reversed as well as when the court reinstates the case.
If it didn't get reversed, what happens? How do these men who were formerly imprisoned at Abu Ghraib pay CACI?
Well, they likely can't pay CACI. They don't have that kind of money. And so it remains to be seen what CACI would want to do. But I think their goal here is to send a signal to other people that not only will we not claim responsibility for allegedly unlawful behavior, we're going to impose costs on you trying to hold us accountable for it.